Maintaining a stable electrical grid in Ireland is hard, maybe harder than any other significant country. Our solar resources are pretty poor, which will surprise no one who's visited our cloudy northern shores. We've got great wind, but not always. Our mountains are what would be called hills anywhere else, so even though we get a lot of rain, hydro isn't a big player. No geothermal. Even if we wanted to burn fossil fuels, our only gas field is running dry, so it's almost all imported. And other than wind, the only indigenous fuel is soggy baby coal, known locally as turf, but you might know it as peat. Luckily, we've stopped burning that to generate electricity. Since we're an island, to import electricity, we need to build undersea cables called interconnectors. The island of Ireland currently has 3 to Britain, and we're building our first to the continent. So, as I talked about in my video on Duckenflauta, energy storage has to be a big part of the solution here. And there's nowhere in the world where there is so much happening on the storage front in such a small area. So I thought it would be good for Decarbonize to dig in a bit deeper about energy storage and Ireland. This is a story in 6 chapters: how much storage we need to decarbonize our grid, and 5 technologies that are either currently being deployed here or have a serious proposal on the table. Each technology can be placed on the Decarbonization Readiness Level, or DRL. If you want to understand the DRLs, you can watch this video. For the first chapter, I'm going to approximate how much storage Ireland needs to balance the grid on a typical day, assuming our power comes entirely from wind and solar. Let's assume that renewable resources are available 30% of the time. This is a typical day, not during Duckenflauta, when the sun isn't shining or the wind blowing. The current load is about 5 gigawatts on average. For scale, a gigawatt is about the output of a large nuclear power plant. So if we build enough wind turbines to capture a day's worth of energy in 8 hours, and enough storage to get that to last the day, we should be good. Batteries are described by 2 numbers: how much power they can generate at a moment and how much energy they can store, which is often expressed in the number of hours they can run at full power. Using hydro as an example, the number and size of the generators is a measure of the power, and the amount of water behind the dam is storage. So 5 gigawatts times 16 hours means we need 80 gigawatt hours of storage and 5 gigawatts of power. This is the amount we need for 2026, but as the population grows, data centers are built, and transportation and heating are electrified, we'll need more. The projections for 2035 are a doubling of our electricity demand. So let's double all those numbers: 160 gigawatt hours of storage and 10 gigawatts of power for 2035. So, is that achievable? Looking at this chart from Energy Storage Ireland's 2025 pipeline survey, we see that as of last year, there are almost 10 gigawatts of battery capacity in development, which is enough to hit our 2035 target. That's in addition to the 1.3 gigawatts already operational. Even just looking at projects that have received planning permission and operational projects, we're already halfway there. So having enough power capacity is unlikely to be difficult. But the storage situation is more challenging. The 2025 pipeline includes 50 gigawatt hours of storage, about a third of what's needed for 2035. So we'll focus on storage capacity from here. Currently, the primary energy storage technology is lithium batteries, like what you'd find in your cell phone or EV. Lithium batteries respond quickly, allowing them to provide important grid services like voltage stabilization. When paired with grid-forming inverters, they can provide synthetic inertia and support black starts to further support the grid. For every 100 megawatt hours put into the system, there's 95 available to power the grid when needed, giving these batteries by far the highest round-trip efficiency. There are several different types of lithium batteries, some with high energy storage, some that are less expensive, and some that are safer. The grid and many EVs sacrifice storage density for lower cost and higher safety by using lithium iron phosphate or LFP batteries. These are much less likely to burst into flames and don't include many of the problematic metals like cobalt and manganese. Energy Storage Ireland doesn't supply a breakdown of the percentage of energy storage systems in the pipeline that are lithium batteries, but from this page from their report of the operational storage sites, it gives a pretty good idea. 76% of the capacity today comes from lithium batteries and 24% from pumped hydro, which I'll talk about in Chapter 5. Given the large number of sites based on lithium batteries, this is definitely DRL7 territory. We see here how much the cost of lithium batteries has dropped in just the last few years, and that's led to an explosion of their deployment. Just a few years ago, a lithium battery pack might only have an hour of storage. Now 4 hours is becoming common. But at this rate, we're unlikely to see lithium batteries that are cheap enough to make sense for weekly, monthly, or seasonal storage. The next technology is designed to be used less often, but to store large amounts of energy cheaply for days when we don't have enough wind. It's a CO2-based system from the Italian company Energy Dome. It's at DRL6 as they have a first-of-the-kind commercial plant operating in Sardinia, Italy, where I filmed my video on Energy Dome. From a distance, it looks like a giant inflatable indoor tennis court. The big visible dome is to contain CO2 gas, which can be compressed and cooled using plentiful renewable electricity until it becomes a high-density liquid that is easily stored in a much smaller tank. When power is needed, the system is run backwards and the liquid CO2 boils easily and expands into a high-pressure gas, which drives a turbine and a generator, and the gas returns to the giant tent. So this system can store a lot of energy without any critical minerals and uses commercial off-the-shelf parts. No CO2 escapes into the atmosphere, no water is needed, and the round-trip efficiency is about 75%. Google is supporting the deployment of Energy Dome's technology in Ireland at the site of a former peat-fired thermal plant, so they already have the needed grid connection. Energy Dome's system has a power capacity of 23 megawatts, which isn't very much, but it can run at peak power for 8.6 hours, twice as long as a typical lithium battery. It would take 800 of these to meet our entire storage needs, so this first site isn't going to make a big dent, but it's a technology that is easy to scale. The hardest thing is to get the grid connection, and as we decommission coal, peat, and gas plants, there should be plenty of connections to take advantage of. Since our requirement for power can be met with lithium batteries, we only need to cover storage with the long-duration energy storage systems like Energy Dome. So the solution might be to keep the expensive turbines, compressor, and generators the same and just get a larger tent and tanks to store the gaseous and liquid CO2. That way we can generate power for longer while lowering the cost for each megawatt hour. The next technology is another long-duration energy storage system that is supported by Google, though in the US, not in Ireland. I've also already done a video on this technology. Form Energy's iron air battery does not rely on critical minerals, but just, and you probably saw this coming, iron and air. Their battery basically rusts iron, which releases some energy, and then they can run electricity back into the battery to reverse the rusting and store energy. The round-trip efficiency is lower than Energy Dome's, around 45%. Unlike Energy Dome, there's no operational sites yet, or even one under construction, so they're at DRL4. But they're ramping up their factory to build the batteries, and they've signed a lot of deals, so construction is going to start soon on at least one of them, pushing them before the end of the year to DRL6. What's exciting about Form's battery is that it will store 1 gigawatt hour, 5 times what Energy Dome's site will store. But this is just getting started. The facility that Form Energy is going to build in Minnesota for Google will be able to store 30 gigawatt hours. That's a game-changing amount of storage. And like Energy Dome, all you need is an industrial plot of land and a grid connection to build these. They're very scalable. I expect they're only a few years from having enough operational sites to reach DRL7. Pumped hydro was once the only game in town. It's definitely at DRL7. Water is pumped into a high reservoir when electricity is plentiful and run downhill through a generator when it's needed. Even just 6 years ago, storage was dominated by pumped hydro. Last year, battery energy storage systems exceeded pumped hydro for the first time, and they continue to grow quickly while pumped hydro remains pretty flat. It's hampered by high initial construction costs and the requirement of a specific topography, a high lake and a low lake. Round-trip efficiencies are lower than lithium batteries at around 75%. There is a pumped hydro proposal that's under review for Ireland, the Silvermines project. Guess where it's located? If you said County Tipperary, you'd be right. But if you said on the site of an old silver mine, you'd also be right. It uses the old mine pit as the lower reservoir. It would require construction of a new reservoir at the top of a nearby hill. If it stays on schedule, it should become operational by 2032. This project has a generation capacity of 296 megawatts and storage of 2.1 gigawatt hours, a significant chunk of what we need. If Silvermines is built, it will be one of just a few pumped hydro sites constructed outside of China this decade. The Rathrush Green Energy Park in County Carlow is, I think, even less likely to be built than the Silvermines project. Fundamentally, it's very much like Energy Dome's CO2 battery, but rather than storing liquid CO2 in giant thermoses, they split water into hydrogen and oxygen in an electrolyzer and then store hydrogen gas in giant underground chambers. All of the components are available off the shelf, but they've never been combined quite this way or at this scale, so I'm putting this at DRL4. The project is projected to cost 2 billion euros and supply a significant 600 megawatts for 70 hours, or 4.2 gigawatt hours, twice the energy stored by Silvermines and 20 times that stored at Energy Dome. The cost is high and the development time comparable to pumped hydro. This technology has by far the lowest round-trip efficiency. For every megawatt hour delivered, over 4 will be required to split water into hydrogen and oxygen and then burn the hydrogen to generate electricity. The low efficiency means that this system will be the lowest priority to charge and the last to be used. Each chapter is a technology that I think is less likely to be deployed than the previous. A grid-scale lithium battery is being deployed somewhere in the world every day. The CO2 and iron air batteries proposed are almost certainly coming online in Ireland in this decade, though it's not clear if more projects will follow, as these technologies are unproven at scale. The Silvermines pumped hydro project will depend on the cost. But as I said before, pumped hydro was the best technology available in the past, but its days are numbered. And 2 billion euros is a lot of money for a storage system with a round-trip efficiency of 25%. All 5 of the projects proposed are technically feasible. But other than the lithium batteries, they are new enough, or in the case of pumped hydro, complicated enough that the cost information is uncertain. For lithium batteries and pumped hydro, I just use a generic cost, and for the iron, air, and CO2 batteries, these are cost estimates once the system has moved into mass production. If pumped hydro or hydrogen can't deliver a project that's cost competitive with lithium, there's no reason to build them. There are other technologies coming soon that are promising, and I expect we'll see in Ireland around the end of the decade, most notably batteries based on sodium rather than lithium. But none of them have publicly released proposals for Ireland, so that's why they're not covered here. What I expect to see by the end of the decade is a fleet of energy storage systems dominated by lithium batteries, but also including some of the other technologies. Given the trend towards larger storage with lithium batteries and the addition of long-duration energy storage systems like Energy Dome and Form Energy, we should have no difficulty meeting and exceeding the 160 megawatt hour target I set out in Chapter 1. When the wind is blowing, any excess electricity will be directed at the closest lithium battery or to export if the value of the energy is higher in Britain or in France once the Celtic interconnector comes online in 2028. Once the lithium batteries are full, the next available system will be used, prioritizing those with the highest round-trip efficiency. The battery energy storage systems should be placed around the country to minimize energy loss due to grid congestion, driving curtailment and dispatch down to zero. Grid-enhancing technology should also be employed to minimize energy loss due to grid congestion, but that's a different video. When the wind dies down, the system is reversed, prioritizing extracting energy from the lithium batteries due to their high round-trip efficiency, or importing via the interconnectors if the price is favorable. In times of Dunkelflaute, we then augment this system with imports from countries where the wind is still blowing, the sun is still shining, or they have a fleet of nuclear power plants. In times of low demand, we could even charge the batteries with power from the interconnectors. So the news is all good. We have a mature technology for balancing the grid in lithium batteries, and at least 2 promising technologies for long-duration energy storage, all of which we'll see here in Ireland in the next few years. This will allow us to say goodbye to gas peakers and curtailment. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I really do appreciate reading and responding to them. If you've learned something, I recommend liking and subscribing to my channel. And you can support the channel by buying me a pint or a YouTube thanks. Maybe you want to watch more of my videos on energy storage. And please forward this video on to everyone you know who thinks camping in a giant tent filled with CO2 would result in too good of a night's sleep.